Welcome to Compassionate Conversations, a podcast produced by the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI Racine County, discussing subjects related to mental health and mental illness. Welcome back, and thank you for listening to the second part of the conversation with Scott and Maria. We want to remind you that if you feel triggered during this conversation, please stop listening, take some time, and come back when you're able. So, speaking of help, why don't we talk a little bit about BeLeaf and what they do? What is BeLeaf, and how do they help survivors of sexual abuse?
Um, I'm gonna actually. Our executive director gave me a great kind of intro type, elevator spiel thing here. But it's Belief Survivors is a Racine nonprofit that provides a safe and compassionate environment to promote hope and healing after sexual assault. There are two programs under the Belief tree, if you want to call it. They are the sexual assault services and stop child abuse and neglect. Um, the sexual assault services is Racine's Rape Crisis Reaction Center. They provide a variety of services to assist survivors during the healing process. And a good way to categorize them is this is very deliberate in the choosing the name of Belief, the LEAF of Belief, in the organization's name. They stand for lifting, empowering, advocating, and fighting. So there's a need for what belief does. If I can quote a couple of statistics that, you know, there's just a couple, but it says 1 in 5 women in their life in the United States will experience an attempted or a completed rape, throughout their lifetime. And for men, nearly a quarter of men in the U.S. will experience some form of sexual violence in their lifetime. Right, different definitions of these, but men are not immune. Men and boys are victims and survivors as well. Um, and a lot happens in the teenage years, but as well as older as well. Right. So, and the unfortunate thing is, and a lot of times it is people that they know. It's not. This is not stranger danger in most cases. When it's sexual assault, it is usually someone that they know. So
Could be a family member, could
yes,
be a friend of the family, could be
right,
somebody who already has
Mhm.
access to
the
the family.
person. Very there the it, statistically it is a very low number that is a complete stranger that does this to another person.
Now, if you allow me, I wanted to interject a little bit in here because here at Namirosin County, we are actually working on starting a support group for survivors of sexual assault, and you are going to be leading one of those groups. What is going to be the focus of those support groups?
Um, it's evolved slightly, but it is a matter of there is an urgency for the program. The idea started originally because I recognized a gap at Belief, which was that Belief services are free to survivors.
Right.
And they are very good services. All of their therapists have master's degrees or more. And the problem is that we are a nonprofit. We have a very limited budget. And the unfortunate reality is the waiting list to get these services is long and growing. I'm not going. I have a number, um, and then it's a large number, and I realize, is there a way? Because one of the biggest things when I went through my molestation and afterwards, I felt alone, and that it was my daughter who actually reminded me that we had communications because my daughter worked at Belief at the time and said, "Hey, don't forget NAMI. They do support groups." And I realized that's what a support group is, so you don't feel alone.
Correct.
You are not alone in what you are going through, and the power of knowing that others have experienced the same as you, and the power of knowing you're not alone is tremendous, and it can help in the healing. And so I approached Nami, and we created a collaboration that is coming to fruition. I don't. Did they approve the date that we started? We thought of
I
yet?
don't have the dates yet. I know
Okay.
they're coming up
Right.
soon, but
So
hopefully it will be running. By the time that you are listening to this, we will probably
hopefully
already
be running.
be on.
And the goal is to provide support in the originally in the interim from when the assault happens to when you can get in to see therapy. However, I've also realized that in reality, even when they're in therapy, they'll probably want to come to the group,
Right.
as because there is support. I'm having a rough day. Guess what? I can come and support. As well as I also realize that if when the person does the work of healing and has reached a point that perhaps they don't need therapy anymore, they may still want to stay in the conversation.
Correct.
And the support group is there as well. And who knows? Maybe they've grown and healed enough that maybe they now want to help others. Which in Nami's model, I know is because it's peer to peer. That would mean, hey, we have someone who's willing to help others.
Right, because the experience, I mean, it's important. You know better than anybody else who hasn't had that experience what that person might be going through. And
Yes.
I believe, and you're right, that's NAMI's model is that people with life experience actually can help in the healing process much better than others.
Yeah, the support group is not meant to be therapy. It is meant to be there.
And that's important. It's not therapy, it's support.
And that model is what the Breath of Courage, the nonprofit of which I put together, working with the arts, was that once we are working through, they have worked through quite a bit of their own trauma, was to be able to move through this, to embrace it, to remove the shame, to step into this place of empowerment and own it in such a way that says, this is only a part of me. It's a scar, and I don't have to be ashamed of this. And then role model, right, as a support to those that when we would go and work with the next group and they would be a part of what we were doing, we would have them come back, and they very much enjoyed that. I think that's really important, that the support group would continue to go on. I mean, I believe that's what keeps us together. We need to be having one another like this and helping out. It's not a terminally unique type thing.
Right.
We're in this together, right?
Yeah.
And because it is a journey, Scott and I have talked about that this isn't a microwave experience that you go through when you embark on the healing process.
Right.
It's a bit of a slow cooker, and it's peeling layers off of that protective self that they have put on, because that's their insulate. This is what's going to keep me safe. And you're telling me to take this off?
Yeah.
You have to have other people around you that can go, yeah, I get that.
You're good.
I understand that.
And I'm with you.
Yeah.
I love that aspect of the ability to, if you think about it, there's only one place and in one person where shame lives, and it's me as the survivor inside yourself.
Right.
And in going through the process of healing, if you can learn that if you can give up the attachment to the shame, no one can make you feel it anymore.
It's an interesting thing about shame and guilt. They can be very helpful to us. It's when we take shame and we make it about every part of us, right? Like, Scott's a bad friend. Scott's a bad dad. Scott's a bad worker. Scott's a bad car driver, whatever.
Right.
Everything about him is bad. When we incorporate shame to that point, then it's devastating and dysfunctional, because it's about every part of you.
Exactly.
As we move through working with those
that I talked about.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's a big wall, but it shuts all of you off, versus being able to take a look at sexual abuse and go, it's a part of you, and we're going to honor it, but it's not all of you. Right. And we're going to get those other parts of you empowered and strengthened to help that part over here. And then it doesn't become so shame inducing.
I am not the bad things that happened to me.
Yeah.
That's very important. And that's, we do say the same about mental illness. I am not my mental illness. So it is important to keep this in mind, to keep that you need others to, walk with you, but also that you are not what happened to you,
Right.
and it doesn't need to, or you could help yourself not to let it control the rest of your life. But it starts with acknowledging what happened, because, and we'll get into this in a moment. But what happens then when we don't acknowledge, when we don't do the work to heal, uh, the consequences of that. Obviously, everybody is different, and everybody lives their experience in a different way. But there are aspects of it that I believe they're very common to anybody who has any trauma in their life. So even though there are particularities, there are very individual experiences, there is also a sense of common experience.
Yes.
Like, we have all been through this, and that in a way can be what unite us and what help us keep walking together, instead of everybody trying to find healing on their own,
Right.
without any external help.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
where group is good,
Yeah.
because it does address that. We've all been through this common experience, right? And we can touch base with that. You get into your therapy, now you can start unpacking those very individual features that show up very different, because everybody was in a different home environment, right? There might be additional layers of other things going on within that person as well that someone may not have. So it just makes for a really nice balance of being able to have your individual therapy and then to be a part of a support group as
Yes.
well.
Well, speaking to that point about the common experience, that how prevalent would you say sexual assault is in our community? And what would you say are the main manifestations of trauma on people's mental health?
Sure. Sexual abuse is much more prevalent than we think. That being that much of the time it goes underreported because it's such a shame based event that has happened within the family system, right? So even if it's known within the family system, it often will get stuffed, it gets minimized, right? They'll do a whole lot of rationalization around it. Kind of back to the myths that we were talking about earlier. Well, it only happened one time, right? Oh, it's by someone that you love or someone that loves you. Oh, you weren't physically touched. But these are the things that need to be educated within the community so they know that does qualify as sexual assault or sexual abuse, right? I mean, they have to know, otherwise it just gets stuffed. Then if that's there, we have to move within this idea of opening up the communication and the conversation within family systems, within the community. Again, breaking that shame. So as I take a look at and have recognized what happens within adults as we move forward, I see things like lack of emotional and physical boundaries. So they can move out into the world, they're not able to put up a healthy emotional boundary, or they don't have an emotional vulnerability. They shut down.
Right.
So they're not connecting very well. Boundaries are very, I call them warehouse. So if you walk into a warehouse, there's really not rooms. There's just a bunch of shelves and a big door, like a semi can come in.
Right.
They just let anything and everyone in, right? Versus boundaries that are like a home where there's structured doors and there's rooms and they can move through those and vet people out who they're allowing into their life. They don't do that very well. Passive aggressive behaviors can also lead to legal troubles, anxiety, isolation, depression, often feeling very alone. They can abandon themselves. So even though they were abandoned in the process of having been abused, they will abandon themselves
Right.
in the process of protecting themselves. I see that quite often. Social disorders, not really feeling comfortable around other people, kind of feeling like, wait a second, I'm like, everyone's in the fishbowl and I'm not, kind of thing, kind of separate from.
Right.
I see that quite often as well. And manifestation of personality disorders, and I touch on that very lightly and very carefully. But that is something that when you start to see someone who hasn't dealt with moving into healing, you start to get to about 25, 30 years old, you're going to start to see some of those things that we call access to personality disorders that can be very difficult for them to up and overcome. Relationship issues in general. So this emotional dysregulation and low self-esteem issues, it makes them hard to be able to be in friendship or in intimate relationships. A lot of blaming, controlling, inconsistent with their day to day, within their job, within school, again, within relationship, and a lot of projection of their hurt and pain. That's primarily what is happening. So if they have a partner in their life, that partner will often get a whole lot of that externalization of the hurt and pain. And that's part of the control, because it's just too hard to take a look at that or to even feel it, for that matter, because it's a somatic thing too. This isn't just a knowledge, head knowledge. There's a bodily response that goes under that can be there and come up and be triggered. So they can end up with a lot of medical issues as well, because they're suppressing this over time. So
and the stress and the PTSD and the depression and all the other factors that get involved in this process of something that has not been dealt with. Although I would say also while you are dealing with it, this might be manifestations that will happen during your process as you're working your way out and as you're working into your own healing.
Absolutely. And just that piece on the medical piece, as I talk about that somatic part, the bodily part, is that our nervous system is the myofascial tissue. This is fascinating to me. The myofascial tissue within our body, if we were to pull it out, it would look like jellyfish. Jellyfish look like kind of that like clear gooey, right? But that holds our bones and, our nervous system and our muscle together. But you pull that out, that's full of a neural network. And that has been traumatized as well. So wherever or however a child or an adult was abused, they'll often hold that pain or end up having some type of medical issue down the road in the area of where things had happened. So the body will hold that, be it that the body picks up on trauma faster and quicker than our brain actually. It's like milliseconds, and then the brain finally comes through and processes, right? But however, when you're in a trauma state, that full processing doesn't always happen, back to getting stuck in that limbic brain. So you're in that fight, flight, freeze, fawn. And now the body's literally kind of stuck.
Right. With the pain and with the experience, without being able to make sense out of it.
Absolutely.
I know that actually kind of goes, some of the information. I'm doing the family-to-family training here, and they talk about there's the genetic side of mental illness as well as the environmental side. There are some that I have no doubt there is a genetic physical factor that comes into play for some people. Other side, the environmental side, this is where what hurts so much is for just, not hurt, but it hurts in the I'm angry about it point of view sense, is that everything you just described, all these things that occur to us, if we create a world that didn't have this, they would go away.
Correct.
Do you know what I mean? These are induced. These are in mental illnesses that are induced into people because of the circumstances they go through. And you described it. Our body holds this, and it manifests it. And what comes of it? Well, guess what? Now I get to go see my therapist 3 times a week or whatever, or I don't process it and all of those. Yes, there are mental illnesses that I totally think they're physical in nature, and my heart goes out for every single one of them, because in some ways that's you got to cope, and do the best you can. Some of them, though, being induced into people is what angers me, because it doesn't have to be there.
No, it doesn't. And it can be really complicated on the form of like dual diagnosis.
Yes, I agree.
So if we're talking, let's talk an adult that might already be dealing perhaps with maybe bipolar or major depressive disorder, and they get sexually abused. You have just layered on something so significant to this individual's lives at that point, that dual diagnosis and that manifestation of how they have to go about healing is pretty significant and very overwhelming.
So one thing can trigger the next. So it's a loop in a way.
Yeah.
Please stay tuned and don't miss the last part of this conversation with Scott and Maria on Compassionate Conversations. Compassionate Conversations is brought to you in a partnership with United Way of Racine County. Thank you for your support. NAMI Racine County is a local affiliate of the National Alliance on Mental Illness. Our vision is to create a compassionate community where all people affected by mental illness live healthy, fulfilling lives. NAMI Racine County provides advocacy, education, support, and public awareness so that all individuals and families affected by mental illness can build better lives. Visit us at www.namiracinecounty.org for more information on mental health and related activities.